All right. Hey there, old friends and probably some new friends. This is the first time this podcast is doing video. If you don't know me, so my name is Jared Fishman. I've been a teacher for roughly 20 years now, mostly in the independent school world. I'm a history teacher. And in terms of a couple of other things related to this podcast, I've been a lifelong gamer forever. I've been gaming since I was about 10 years old, and that kind of eked into my professional life. And this podcast that you're listening to is called 20-Sided Gamified. So again, some of you may have listened to this before. Some of you may have absolutely no idea what this podcast is. So in that sense, and look at Kelly smiling. Then again, this is exciting for me because we don't normally do video. This is the first one. So it's always nice to see. I'm going to try to keep my hands in my pockets because I don't want to get too wild given what we're going to talk about today. But so 20-Sided Gamified, right? So essentially what this podcast is all about, it's all about gaming and how it crosses over and intersects with education. I have authors on. I have friends on. In some cases, I have authors that are friends on. And if you go to Acast or if you go to Spotify or if you go to really any major platform for podcasts, you will find that 20-Sided Gamified has, at this point, probably about 40 different episodes out, which have all been recorded in the last year. And last but not least, the other thing about this podcast is the fact that it's kind of tied to the work I do with HMGS Next Gen Inc. So what that is, it was sort of born out of the larger Historical Miniatures Gaming Society. And as I said, I'm a lifelong gamer. So I like lots of games, but historical miniatures are a big one for me. And I know they're a big one for our two guests today. So on that note, what is this podcast going to focus on today? So I'll tell you really quick, and then I'm going to have our guests introduce themselves. The reason they're smiling is we're going to get saucy today. We're going to get a little controversial because I've been thinking about this now for a few days. Again, everybody's laughing because we're all history nerds. We're all smart people. I like to think that we're all smart. I think we are. So we're going to talk about Napoleonic Wargaming today, which if you have never wargamed before, Napoleonics are kind of in a lot of ways like the end all be all of wargaming, just for a whole slew of reasons, which we're going to talk about. But obviously, if you're a historical wargamer and you like Napoleonics, you probably saw Ridley Scott's Napoleon. Okay. And we are going to loop a little bit of a review of that movie in. And by the way, the reason this is the Wild West podcast is because I haven't asked these guys what they thought of it. And they haven't asked me. So none of us really know what we're going to say until we actually talk about it. So that's kind of what this pod is going to be about today. Now, for some introductions, we got to start with the world's greatest co-host, Kelly McManus. Hi, Kelly.
Hey, how you doing, Jared?
What's going on, dude?
Not much, just, recuperating.
Oh, no, I'm sure, because you just saw the movie
last night.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, man, fresh.
Yeah, indeed. It is very fresh. So Kelly, before you start ranting and raving, tell the audience out there, because again, there are some people that are watching this that have literally no idea what we are, what we do. What do you do for this podcast?
So I'm the co-host for, the Friendcast portion of it. For now, I know with PAX, we'll be doing a bit more of the interview sections of it. But I do some of your graphic editing for the podcast. So we just made some banners, taking our other guest here, Matt's artwork and kind of putting it onto banners, T-shirts, and business cards, so things like that. But mostly, I'm here for moral support.
Oh, really? Moral support, I see. You're here to basically keep the host in line. That's probably important. All right, now look, I described Matt last time he was on the podcast. I'm going to embarrass him. I described him as one of the most interesting people that I've ever met on the internet, which he is scoffing at and drinking his coffee, I'm sure. Matt, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Matthew Klein. I'm a retired NYPD detective. Was in the military, went to Iraq in the early thousands when the global war on terrorism kicked off. Avid war gamer, same thing like you, probably like 10 years old. Mm-hmm. And, just live and breathe the wargaming, world. But that's pretty much it. So now I'm retired, and now I actually have a little company called Battle Tribe where I do my artwork for fun and stuff, and it's been pretty good. I've been working on a lot of different projects, and wargaming on the other end of it. That's it. Living the
for
dream.
sure. No, you really are, because you have a good deal. But then again, like, you've been shot at. So it's like, I want to be careful here. It's like, you've seen some things out there.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
have a well-deserved life at this
Thank
point, you know?
Good
So
times.
yeah, for sure. And I'm glad that you're, because technically, I guess, I feel like you're going to kind of become a member of the Friendcast rotation, because you are a good dude. And you're one of those people I kind of wish we all lived closer.
Yeah.
Like, if I lived down the street from you, it's almost like when I pick on my friend Titch, like, I would be at your house every day and vice versa. I'm rather sure playing some war games, you know?
Absolutely.
So yeah, in all seriousness, for the two of you, you know, thanks for coming on for today's episode. Now, look, I'm going to put both of you on the spot. And again, for my audience out there, for those of you that don't know me, I do this for fun. I mean, obviously, if you've been following us on Instagram or you get a chance to, the pod has been blowing up, and I'm very proud of that. Cool. I think that this podcast does some things that maybe some others don't. I mean, it's a pretty holistic look at wargaming. But you know what? Let me back up. It not just wargaming, really. I mean, all different kinds of games. We've had people come on, talk about board games. We've had teachers on, artists on, authors on. And I think that the reason the pod is doing so well is because a lot of people are eating all of this, you know, sort of material up. Now, again, I am putting these guys on the spot, and I never blow smoke at people, and I don't expect them to blow it back at me. But I am going to ask these guys because, again, Matt, this is his second time on. Kelly, you know, is co-hosting, kind of helping out. Kelly, I'm going to put you on the spot. Here we go. What do you like, even if you didn't know me, what do you like about this podcast? Where's the value in it?
I think the conversations that happen here are, they don't take the approach of like focusing purely on someone's career. Like you really try to get to know people. And the first episode, I think really like drove that home. Like you find ways to be able to actually talk with someone and get to know them. Or, you know, in other kind of interview podcasts, that's not the case. And you also look at I like how the podcast focuses on the larger culture of gaming. Be it, you know, war games, board games, like kind of everything that you said. I like that because I like seeing the wider picture of how people utilize, you know, what we do as a hobby and implement it, be it professionally or not in their day to day.
No, that makes sense. And it's honest. I appreciate that. What about you, Matt? Because again, we kind of met in a really weird way. We sort of met through this podcast.
Yeah.
What do you like about it? I mean, what do you like about the episodes?
The one thing I like before I even listen to the podcast is like in wargaming, just the depth of different types of people you meet out there and like all the different walks of life that, you know, you come together. And like when I started listening to your podcast, it's like, that's the feeling I got already. Like you just find all these interesting people, you know, people that you just play a game with. It's not just an opponent. Like you find out like, you know, their whole life story and like all just really just amazing people that are in this, you know, this culture of wargaming.
Yeah, there's just a lot of folks out there that are interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah. I appreciate both of those opinions. And yeah, I mean, I do think, look, I'm not particularly religious. And again, here's our first moment of controversy, right? Look, I don't know. Maybe there's something out there. I have no idea. All I know is when I go, what I'm hoping is that, you know, there's 1,000 of these episodes. And if we're all still around in, you know, 40 or 50 years, it'd be nice to know that if somebody gets into gaming, they're going to be able to learn a lot about the hobby. And again, Matt, I'm going to steal your words, like all the interesting folks out there that kind of do it. My hope is that people will get a chance to really find out how robust all of this is. That's sort of my goal, you know?
Yeah.
So you know what? So again, for people that have never listened, here we go. Like we're going to do this. So that was kind of a little bit of a long-winded intro. Again, if you listen to the episodes, we're not always this sort of long-winded, but again, you know, there are some folks that have no idea what we are. So usually what we do on this podcast, you can kind of call this a friendcast in a lot of ways, right? So I have podcasts that I do with authors, and then I have podcasts with friends, you know, and again, you know, Kelly, obviously, Matt, obviously, you know, these are people that, again, if we live down the street from one another, who knows, we might be having this exact conversation in a pub or something, you know, over an adult beverage. Again, if my students are listening, you know, I'm still a good guy. Don't worry. We're all good guys, you know? So here's the deal. The topic of today, Napoleonic Wargaming. That's kind of where I want to start. And then I want to loop in a little bit about this infamous I would phrase it. Ridley Scott movie about Napoleon Bonaparte. And by the way, here's a quick disclaimer before we get into this. Now, I'm not going to speak for Matt or Kelly. If they want to jump in here, they're more than welcome. I'm going to be a little bit of a hypocrite today, right? So in the sense that, Kelly and I, with our little gaming group in New Jersey, I'm the guy who's always like, oh God, it's a history movie. You just got to give it a little bit of a, almost like a free pass on some level. These filmmakers, they've got to take their creative license. They're going to kind of make the film that we want. If you really want to know more about something, you should probably read and not, base your opinions on a movie. And I usually take that sort of role, and that's not going to happen today, I don't think. Right? I know. Look,
it's going to be one of those.
It might be. In my classroom, I've been talking this movie up to my students without really knowing a ton about it. I was like, yeah, go see it. Because
you made a mistake.
Possibly, yeah. I just spent a month on all of this in school, and every year for the last 20 years, I usually spend a month, or so on not just really Napoleon. I mean, we're not just studying his battles. I don't necessarily think that you need to spend a month on that as a regular sort of mainstream student. But yeah, like the French Revolution, a little bit about Napoleon, a little bit about the Napoleonic era, a little bit about the Congress of Vienna, So yeah, I've got a little bit of a stake in this one. I think that's probably right. That's the easiest way to say. Now, I don't know about you guys. I don't know. Do you want to tantalize our audience with maybe some brief opinions before we get into the wargaming element? I don't know how you guys feel. How do you feel? I don't know who wants to go first.
Man. I will say this: when I started looking, like when news about this movie was coming out, and like the first images were leaked of like Joaquin Phoenix in the like Revolutionary General's uniform from like the early war, and then I heard details about what the scope of the film was going to be. I immediately got nervous.
Yeah.
A little nervous. What about you, man?
What it is? It's all like, I like Ridley Scott, but to me he's like hot or cold. Like for every Gladiator, Black Hawk Down, you have Robin Hood. Like there's. So I was same thing you said though. Really nervous that it was his whole life in a 3-hour movie. And you'll be happy to know, guys, a 4-hour cut version of the movie's coming out to Apple.
Yeah. What's really? No, go ahead, Matt. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say like. I like the 2002 miniseries that was on A&E, and that was how many episodes? A couple hours. And they did it. I just can't imagine how you could do it in 3 hours. So a little nervous.
It's funny, Matt, you bring that up. So I have again, I never mention names on here, but I have a student who is just sharp. She is just unbelievably sharp. And it was funny, like literally the last period on, I guess it was Tuesday, right before we went on break. We were sort of talking about this movie, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to see it with my dad. As soon as I get out of here." And one of my students, her hand just shoots up, and she's like, "Mr. Fishman, I don't know if you should go see this movie because Ridley Scott kind of doesn't want you to go see it because of Apple. Like, it's gonna be like that 4-hour cut." And I think she's right. I think when we get to the movie part of today's podcast, we can talk a little bit about that, the fact that you're getting that extra hour or maybe even 90 minutes. I don't know what the exact runtime is, but I wonder what that will kind of add to everything. Mm-hmm. Now, look, let's talk about wargaming. Thinking about how to do this, again, we've got listeners out there who is like Napoleonic Wargaming. I have no idea what that is. And at the same time, we probably also have some folks out there that are probably as experienced as we are and just about as excited as we are right now to talk about Napoleonics. So maybe we'll start like this. Here's a really quick intro, right? So if you've never wargamed before, what I would do is I would Google Napoleonic Wargaming. And what you're going to find is an unbelievably vibrant period to do some tabletop gaming in. And that's the word that I want to start with, vibrant. And I can see Kelly and Matt, their heads are sort of nodding. Kelly McManus, co-host of the year. Yeah. Put you on the spot, my friend. Are you ready?
Yeah.
I know you love Napoleonics, and it is particularly, I know you have maybe the right word be fascination with the Prussian military of the Napoleonic era.
Yep.
Now, for our audience out there, you're a new war gamer, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Yeah. I would
okay.
always say that.
Okay. So what is it about Napoleonics that just sort of sucked you in when you first got into games? What is it? What is it about the period? What is it about the figures?
Let's put it like this, right? Like,
yeah, go for
Napoleonics was the first thing I cut my teeth on.
Gotcha.
You know, so I took a deep dive from the get-go.
Right.
But in terms of the period, the thing that interests me most is how the old world of feudalism truly dies, and how centralization in terms of like societal order, military administration, economics takes over Europe, and how everyone is racing to catch up to the innovations that France is bringing to the table. And then what France is exporting as part of its, revolutionary period moving into this imperial one, and what each little individual country has to do to overcome the difficulties and adapt. So for me, like, my main historical background is on the early modern period of Prussian and German history. Like, 1806 to 1813 is this revolutionary period in of itself, which so much changes just to survive, right? As these independent states are at risk of losing everything. So seeing what they're able to do from like a top down and bottom up perspective is really awe-inspiring. And then like also looking beyond that, like what those lessons are and how other countries like America, for instance, is taking from that and trying to adapt it in their own society is really fascinating to me.
So it's really the history that drew you into the period to start.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what about you, Matt? Is it the same story? Is it the history that roped you in, or is there something else about Napoleonics that really gripped you?
So like the history, like what it is, I love seeing something first, and then like I get into the history, and then just like go down the rabbit hole of learning all the different stuff and why things are. So I started off as a sci-fi, fantasy kind of war gamer. And then as like, I would say about Saving Private Ryan, I started getting into historicals. But I remember my first dip with Napoleonics is getting a War Games Illustrated with a sprue with just 2 free 95th rifles. And I'm like, I put them together and I'm like, these guys need friends.
Yeah.
So boom, right?
Yeah.
So if War Games Illustrated listening, that stuff works. When you put the little free sprue in there, I'm like, I need it. So then I just went down the rabbit hole and just started, reading everything possible and started building. And, the plastics were out. You had Victrix and you had the Perry miniatures. So you were able to get like large masses of figures together, and then just start going down the rabbit hole and investigating it. And it's just a really wild, elegant, like kind of way of combat. And I love how like you have all these different uniforms, wildly different. And then like everybody kind of like, you see each other on the battlefield. It's not like a modern battlefield where you pop your head up, you get shot. These giant formations have to really get close and maneuver, and how they had the aide-de-camps and they would pass messages and command and control. Just a really cool looking at a way of warfare that I just found very interesting.
Yeah, for me, it was really growing up. So my dad started gaming. Huge shout out to my dad out there. So I assume he loves YouTube. So he may be one of the new listeners, believe it or not. So shout out to the old man. So look, he started gaming in the 70s, old school, So when I was growing up, I was born in 81. So I have very vivid memories of my dad in the early to mid 80s painting 15 millimeter Napoleonics. And again, as like a little kid, I was really taken aback by the uniforms. Even before I knew anything about what the Napoleonic era was about, just the vibrance and Matt, the word you use, elegance, right? There's an elegance to the way all of these armies look. And again, not to sound lame, right? But there is a huge component. If you've never wargamed before out there, right? It's far less about warmongering and far more about art and creativity, right?
Yeah.
And what's really kind of cool about Napoleonics is each army has just such a distinctive look to it. So if you're an artist and you really like to paint miniatures, you really like to base miniatures, you really like to flock miniatures, right? Doing all of those things and really kind of creating that diorama sense. Napoleonics, not only is it a great medium or genre, whatever word you want to use to kind of get into, it's all encompassing. So, Matt, you haven't got up to the what I like to call the HQ, where at least where I live. I know Kelly, you've had a chance to come here, but it's like the movie Zulu, when the Brits look out, they're like, I see thousands of them. I have thousands of Napoleonic miniatures.
It's awesome.
Which,
really cool.
well, I mean, I guess it is, but
they're all beautiful.
Awesome.
It's just such a cool era. Now, here's a question for you two guys. And again, I love putting my guests and my poor co-host, poor Kelly. You've had to deal with this a lot because we don't rehearse in advance. There's nothing more lame. And again, I know how I can be. I just think our podcast is better than a lot of others. Nobody's reading from cue cards with their toes crossed that they're going to get a lot of views. You know what I mean? I mean, don't get me wrong. I like to get listens and everything, but this is all off the cuff. Why don't we talk about rules for a second, which is, again, a vicious and horrifying rabbit hole to go down. So I'm not going to ask
this.
I know. It's right?
No one's ever going to listen to anything that comes out of my mouth ever again.
So why don't we frame it this way? What Napoleonic rules have you played? Maybe we'll just sort of start there. So Matt, I know you've got a pretty beautiful collection of Napoleonics, and I know you've got a gaming group. I know you've done this before, obviously. What rules do you like? What do you play?
You're gonna get me.
No, I know. Like, this is why I'm saying this is the most controversial episode.
When I started out, I actually used the Foundry had a rule set called Napoleon. Mm-hmm. Really beautiful book, and it was you would have several brigades. You have a lot of orders you would put down. You would pre-plan all your orders and place them down as cards and everything, and then everybody would reveal them and you carry through. And then I played some general the armée. Yeah. So I enjoyed that, my group and everything. But this is where I get all the hate. It's like I end up. What it is it's like when it comes to wargaming, any time period, it's always like, how much time do you have? What are you trying to achieve? I like to do big, giant games with tons of miniatures on the table in like 3 hours, 4 hours, and go out to dinner. So I use black powder.
Oh, there it is.
with a bunch of modifications.
Yeah. Why does everybody hate that game?
They hate it, man.
People really hate it.
They really hate it. I don't know. I don't know. Everybody that comes over and we play, we have a great time. You know, whether I've done Napoleonics with it. I do American Civil War with it. I do Zulu and Sudan. Those are the four big things. And I have a blast. We tack on a bunch of different, homebrew stuff to it, and we have no problem with it. And that's it. But at the end of the day, everybody's a happy customer. You don't have to rap too much. But I could definitely understand there's things that are lacking that wouldn't be historically correct and stuff like that. A lot of people don't like the command and control. There's a chance that your entire brigade might sit there. Yes. So you got to slide either way if you like that. You don't like that. But I enjoy it and I have a blast. So
So I'm not going to front. I mean, when I play Napoleonics with friends, I don't run those rules very often.
Yeah.
But I use them a lot with Next Gen. And I use them a lot in my career because my students can pick it up pretty fast. And again, they're not there to count the buttons, so to speak, on the uniforms. They're not there to see the nuances of how many paces it would take, for a unit to go from square to line. You know what I mean? And again, I don't want to pick on people, right? There are moments where I guess a mindset like that is fine. And if that's what kind of gets you going, everybody should be allowed to kind of play the games that they want. Absolutely. You know what I mean? So I get it, and honestly, I'll say this, shout out to Warlord Games, because the bottom line is, whether you're talking about Bolt Action or Hail Caesar or, they've done a lot for historical wargaming, and anytime you can, right? And anytime you can go to a comic book store and find those games sitting alongside Warhammer, all the power to you.
They made historical very accessible.
Absolutely.
You get a starter box and you get all the stuff, and just the amount of plastic that's out there. The days of doing 28 millimeter in metal is insane. Insane. Yeah, insane. I would have never been able to do it.
Yeah, and the boxes they're making now with the epic scale that they release, I'm not a fan of it, but I love that it's there, and I love that people are able to easily get into it. It comes with the rule book. It's a good product at the end of the day.
Yeah, and Kelly, what about you? In terms of Napoleonic. So let's say and by the way, I am going to move around a little because I do talk with my hands, right? So here we go, right? I know for a fact that later in this episode, you're probably going to talk about this, but I know you're actually painting Napoleonics right now.
Yes.
So has your group thought about rules? Like, is there something that you've played before that you enjoy that you kind of want to roll out?
Not really. So we started with black powder. Over time, like members of our little group that we had got frustrated with some of the rules and the fact that we always had to like come up with our own little house rules, and not everyone knew the house rules and everyone had their own preferences. So we moved on from black powder to a friend of mine made his own rule set. We played that for a little bit. And then we kind of stopped playing Napoleonics. So we're in this weird period where, I'm repainting all of my stuff. I'm rebasing it all. My one friend Steven, he got LaSalle, so he's been reading that, and that's kind of going to be our entering point, or re-entering point, I should say.
That's awesome
for Napoleonics. But I also played Field Battle, which is amazing. I really like that system. So kind of don't have one rule set to go to.
Yeah, you know what I love about your choice though? Sam Mustafa is a New Jersey guy, man.
Yeah, he is.
He is one of the most interesting authors out there. I love reading his stuff. He's got so many interesting mechanics in his games, like whether you're talking about Rommel or LaSalle or Blucher. He's so quirky, and I say that in a positive way. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? He's also a professor. You know, he teaches about the Napoleonic era. It's funny, like he was supposed to, I don't know if I should say this, but I will. He was supposed to actually guest on this podcast a very long time ago, but he's always traveling. And, you know, he wrote me back and I didn't see it. And by the time we both kind of contacted each other, he was in like the archives in like Berlin or whatever, you know, doing research. So he's a very, very interesting dude. I've met him a couple of times. So Matt, have you ever experimented with any of his games?
No, actually my group, they actually bought a copy LaSalle, but I just never played it.
I haven't got a chance to play it.
I heard it was good. And also too, it was more geared to 15 millimeter. Yeah. So I had 28. So I'm just like, you know what's funny? I hope I didn't cut you off there, Matt. No.
Because I always want to be a respectful host, you know? You know, it's funny. I find that whether you're talking about 28s or 15s, you know, so many games out there are now kind of shooting for the let's play on a kitchen table, which can be a little tricky sometimes for 28s, you know?
That's why, like, when the Epic scale came out, I bought everything. And I haven't painted as much as 28s, but I have it just in case, because if you go to a friend's house, you could fight a larger battle with that scale, you know, and it's more accessible. Like, I mean, like just bringing it, like when you bring all your stuff to somebody's house, it's a big undertaking. Terrain and trees and villages and stuff, you know, 28. And, but in the smaller scales, you could do the bigger battles and less to bring, which is nice.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is,
go ahead.
Also perfect for Napoleonics. Like you want to have those big battles.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, we had a podcast, maybe I'm trying to remember when this came out, maybe a couple months ago, where we kind of talked about my buddy Titch White and Corey from Cigar Box Battles, two wonderful people.
Love their product.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Have like almost every mat.
Yeah. No, Corey's a legend. You know, it's funny. I actually knew him before I even knew what the battle mats were. It's just kind of, you know how like wargaming can be. It's like a very small community.
Did you see the Waterloo one?
Yes, I did.
15,
it's like 15
I want it so
feet
big.
long.
15 feet by like 4 feet. Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
They also have Gettysburg too.
Yeah. No, awesome. They don't mess around. You know what's actually kind of funny is, you know, for people that are listening, the question is, are we sort of advertising for Corey? You know, we kind of are. Like, he's a really good friend. And I've got about 40 of his mats as well downstairs. So again, I'm not going to lie. If you're listening to this podcast, advertising is going to happen, you know, but what I'm really going to shoot for are really to work with people that I actually like. Yeah. You know what I mean? Or organizations that I actually like. And Corey is definitely one of those folks who I actually like. So if you're listening out there, or if you're watching, right, because we've got both mediums for this episode, if you go to Cigar Box Battles, what you'll find are some of the best wargaming mats. But you could use them for anything. You could use them for D&D and your role-playing games, things like that. So what Matt's talking about is the fact that Corey just put out like this 15-foot long perfect replica of the, Waterloo battlefield. So if you watch Ridley Scott's movie and we're like, I need a little bit more Waterloo, you can definitely fight it out. If you've got the minis, you can kind of get them out there. And I think, and maybe Kelly, you can speak to this a little bit, because I know you like the smaller minis. It kind of reads to me like 6 mil would probably be the best for that matter, maybe even 10 mil. You like that stuff, right, Kelly?
Yeah, I do. I do enjoy the 6 mil.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Is your collection for 6 mil extensive, or was it just you dipped your toe in?
It's just 7 Years' War.
Oh, okay.
Because, I'm a big Prussian militarism fanatic, right?
You are?
Yeah, I mean, that's what my background's in. So, I got 6 mil so I could recreate all of Frederick's troops in the 7 Years' War.
No, that's cool. Very cool. That's
Pretty impressive.
It is. And that's one of those wargaming periods that probably doesn't get enough love, probably because of Napoleonics. It's almost like, for some folks, it's like, oh, the 7 Years' War is cool, but look at Napoleonics. You get more formations. You have more, I guess you could say, almost like tactical flexibility, and the kinds of maneuvers you can kind of perform on the battlefield.
I would even argue, and this might be a little controversial.
Do it.
I would argue that in terms of the English-speaking world and the result of the Napoleonic, wars, especially with Waterloo, that because of the cultural phenomenon of Napoleon, and keep in mind the English speaking world, we're predisposed to Napoleonics, right? Like 7 Years' War, pretty gruesome conflicts, right? It's really painting the image of what's going to happen, but it's happening between French and German speaking peoples and Russian speaking. So
I get that.
That doesn't really translate over well. The English can't really lay claim other than financial.
Right. Yeah, what's funny?
Backing.
I can't really think of, and again, I'm so busy these days that I don't watch a ton of movies like I used to. Is there a Frederick the Great biopic? I don't think there is.
Not ethically produced. Yeah, no. Right. Yeah, there's a moment in time in history where they did make a movie, and it is filled with lots of poor ideology.
Oh, okay,
like
gotcha.
that.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I love how you tiptoed around that, Kelly.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like you have something in there that you want to get out, but you're like, nope, not appropriate.
Yeah, we're just not going to.
No, that's fine.
Today.
We can always save that for another podcast. So, by the way, I'll throw my 2 cents in. So, being the old man that I'm slowly but surely becoming, as you can see from this video, I am truly a graybeard at this point. I played a lot of Napoleonic rules, a lot. Growing up, because we didn't have a massive amount of space inside of our apartment, we used to play kind of a variant, which my dad actually came up with. I'll give him credit for that. He kind of took DBA and transformed it into a Napoleonic game. And this is early. This is like early 90s, like way before there was a DBN, way before, people started taking DBA and turning it into whatever they wanted. So we used to play that sort of variant in the apartment, which was so much fun. And then just over the years, Kelly, I know you mentioned this, and he was my second guest on this podcast ever. I love Brent Oman's series called The Field of Battle, which basically uses a sequence deck. It's a very weird but really, really fun game. You use basically a sequence deck of cards to kind of determine what actions you're able to take. So instead of an I go, you go type of game where when things move, when things shoot, when things melee every single turn, this kind of turns the sequence of play on its head. I really, really enjoy that game. I've run it at work many times. I know I've run it for Kelly's group. Again, and I think Brent would agree with me. It's not a game for everybody. Because especially if you're a traditional wargamer, if you kind of need to know when things are happening in a turn, it might not be a game for you. But if you like some variability, if you like battles that kind of play out the way that you read them in a book, then I think you'd really like that game. So that's kind of what I lean to. But Kelly was alluding to this earlier. It's a hard period to find a set of rules that everybody is going to like. It's very, very difficult. And I always say it's almost like the holy grail, of wargaming, not only as a period, but also like it's almost like having to find the holy grail as a rule set. So I don't know what you guys think, or if you have a different take on that.
I think that's true.
Yeah.
I've gone back and forth with my group so many times, like, oh, we should try these. Oh, I'm researching this. It's a task in itself to find something that'll scratch every itch and still showcase an aspect of the flavor of the period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, gents. Oh no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say to me, it's based on your game group. Like what you're looking for, the time you have, that kind of thing. So.
For sure.
But I'll tell you one great thing about historical miniatures is, like you have a whole army. There's so many rule sets you can, plug and play. You're not, pigeonholed into one system. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that note, I mean, it's almost like that awesome art that's behind you, Matt. Kind of some old school Warhammer art. Yeah. I mean, look, you pick up some Marines and some Orcs, and it's like, yes, you're stuck. There are other rule sets out there, but I mean, they're really made for, using those Warhammer 40K rules. And if that's not your cup of tea, you kind of have to proxy or, find something else. But it's a little harder, I guess, is my point. With historical war games, you kind of buy the minis, and then you can kind of go out there and find the rules that, like Matt was saying, find the rules that your group is going to like, So for our audience, I hope that gives you a good sense of, what we like about Napoleonics, where some of the pitfalls might be. If I could mention the name of a blog, something that I would say to you, if you're listening, you're like, wow, I really kind of want to get out there and check this genre out. My very good friend, Peter Anderson, who works with HMGS Next Gen Inc., he has a blog out there. So listen up real careful. It's called Blunders on the Danube. If you type in Blunders on the Danube on Google and type in Peter Anderson's name, what you'll find is it's his wargaming blog, but it's a treasure trove of information about Napoleonics, meaning like if you really want to get into this, you go to his website, you go to his painting guides, you go to his scenarios, you'll find tons of information if it is something that you want to get into.
Nope.
All right, let's do this. So part 2 of this podcast. Here we go. Ridley Scott's Napoleon. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, but you've all seen this movie, right?
Day one.
All right, day one. And Kelly, you just saw it.
11:30.
Yeah, I just saw it last night.
All right. Here's how we're going to do this. All right. Why don't we start with some things we liked? Maybe even talk about some things we were neutral on. And then maybe talk about some of the things that maybe burned us up a little bit. All right. Start with some things we liked. Gentlemen, I don't know who wants to start. Oh, by the way, hold on a second. How could I not do this in the world that we live in? If you have not seen this movie and you plan on it, you might want to go and see it first and maybe stop listening now. Because again, I mean, here's the thing. Like if you like history, you probably know a little bit about Napoleon, right? So I don't know, like in a twisted way, like, I don't know, you might want to know something already, so these are, I guess you could say, spoilers. But then again, like I said, if you're well read on the subject, you probably weren't surprised by anything in that movie except for things that probably bothered you to no end, right? But turn it off if you're not ready for this. And if you are, here we go. Gentlemen, what did we like? What were some things that you sort of enjoyed? And maybe Kelly, because I see the words were literally ready to come out of your mouth.
Yeah,
Kelly, tell us a couple of things you liked.
I liked the beginning section of the movie where it's focusing on Napoleon in his early career at Toulon, and primarily his kind of like the character profile they're trying to build on him, where he's this young guy and he's nervous, right? Like when they're doing that siege, he's like, you could see Joaquin Phoenix literally shaking because this is his first military engagement, and like that aspect, looking to someone who has such an impact militarily, like on the world and how, these militaries work. Seeing him kind of shake and be nervous and like have these moments where you could tell like, his adrenaline is up was remarkable. I loved all of that. So I'll leave it there.
Okay. Well, I mean, I can chime
point.
in. Yeah, sure. And I can chime in on that before we get to Matt. I can definitely see that. I mean, look, it's Joaquin Phoenix. Joaquin Phoenix is a legendary actor. And I agree. There were definitely elements of his acting that I thought portrayed some elements of Napoleon's life pretty well. So I'll give you a quick example, right? So look, let's treat this almost on some level like a classroom for a second, right? So look, if you know nothing about Napoleon Bonaparte and you went into this movie saying to yourself, I want to learn something about this guy, he was really socially awkward, which is why being married to Josephine was really, really important for his career. Meaning, he was not going to get into those parties on his own. I don't know if he had Asperger's, but a lot of the sources, and again, for you history people out there, when we talk about sources, whether we're talking about primary sources from back in the day, secondary sources, a lot of it talks about this sort of odd personality that Napoleon sort of had. He could walk into a room and have no idea what to do, no idea who to talk to. He really only banked on his military education, at least at the very, very beginning of his career, which is why the Josephine part of the movie was so important. So Kelly, in that sense, I agree with you. There were mannerisms that Joaquin, I thought, basically like used really well in the film to portray some of that awkwardness.
And I like how the film makes you awkward watching it. Like some of the things that that Napoleon says in the film, Joaquin Phoenix, it's like, why would you say that? Or like, did he really say something? And you have to think like, yeah, he probably did. Because based off readings, like you said, like the guy was a kind of awkward individual.
Yeah.
So
With
I like how
huge chip on his shoulder, by the way.
Oh yeah,
right, massive chip on his shoulder. Right, this is a guy who basically really is of Italian descent. Right, Corsica had been taken over by the French, right around the time of Napoleon's early life, a little bit before that. Right, but ultimately, he's basically the poor kid at the wealthy school, right? He goes to France, he has this huge chip on his shoulder, and he knows, I'm never going to have that noble name. I'm not going to have the wealth to compete with these folks, but ultimately, I'm going to be the smartest dude in the room. And he practically lived in the library. And you get that feeling in watching Joaquin act that role.
Yeah.
Matt, some good things. Like, what kind of jumped out at you in that film where you were like, I'm very pleased by this?
I mean, the art direction is really visually, like all the locations look great. I mean, I loved silly thing. His uniform throughout the movie looked great. He always
Agreed.
had an awesome uniform on that, the high collar and everything like that. So, visually, it was just astonishing. And like some of the scenes too, like what you said too in the beginning and stuff, you could see him, positioning to take advantage of this, very volatile time in France's history and like how he, went through. It's funny, like, like with the, what do you call it? When they had the giant protest and he was shooting, canister into them and stuff.
Yep.
And then betrays them later on. It's just like different stuff. That was a great scene too. With all the people coming towards them and stuff. But they visually, they did a lot of visually thing. It just, what it is, with the whole movie, like, a lot of stuff on the back end, it's just like, I leaned over to my friend a couple times in the movie and I'm just like, really? It spoiled it. But if I was like 11 years old, I would have been like, yay, the whole movie. It's just some wasted opportunities in there.
I appreciate the brutality that they show on the screen, like when the horse gets hit, or awesome. like awful stuff. But like I appreciate it's there, so people who are viewing this who don't have like a background on it understand like how just gruesome, how violent all of this is. And like going on what you said, like the uniforms, the dresses, like everything, immaculately well done. Like all of the uniform, like just the clothing was exceptional.
Yeah. I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. And again, so commenting on a couple of points that you guys have made, right? So we'll start with you, Kelly. So like, well, actually, no, really both of you. So talking about the uniforms, I agree with you guys. I think that in terms of the visual aesthetics of the movie, as a war gamer and as a history person, probably more as a war gamer. I mean, the uniforms were pretty meticulous. Now, I'm sure there's somebody out there who, because again, if you guys know anything, anybody listening out there knows anything about Napoleonic Wargamers, some of them are, I'm trying to find a nice way to put it. Maybe type A, a little bit type A personality, like where everything has to sort of be meticulous. And I'm rather sure that somebody out there was like, no, like that's the wrong uniform for that year, or that's the wrong type of headwear for that year. I don't know. For me, I don't get bothered by that stuff very much at all. And again, like it brought me back to being a little kid, of seeing those sort of vibrant uniforms on the tabletop that my dad was painting and then I paint, and seeing that visually is definitely awesome. And on that note, if we're talking about just art and aesthetics, you've got the really sort of dark background of the movie contrasting with the really bright uniforms, which I thought was really sort of appealing. Now, talking about some of the events that Napoleon was in, I think that as like a history person, let's say you went into that movie not knowing anything about Napoleon Bonaparte's life. I think what Ridley Scott did a really good job of is almost making a Cliff Notes version of Napoleon's life in a few hours, where you always, maybe always is a strong word, other films out there about Napoleon, you're going to see the Battle of Borodino, you're going to see Waterloo. I haven't really seen a ton, not saying it's not out there, but I haven't really seen a ton of some of the things that, Ridley Scott put into the movie, like especially Napoleon's role in the really, like, not just his role in the revolution, but really his role in ending the revolution. He ended the French Revolution, right? And again, we're on YouTube now, so bring the comments out. I'm rather sure somebody out there is going to take offense to that or question that, which is not a bad thing, right? It's America. We're supposed to do that. But look, in my opinion, he comes out, really ends the revolution. And I think that the filmmaker did a really good job showing, how his star rises at Toulon, how he ends up marrying Josephine, how he inserts himself into the end of the Directory and then into the early consulate. I think that the film did a really good job of showing that. So again, Cliff Notes version, something that will kind of tantalize the viewer and be like, I want to go and read now about Napoleon. In that sense, I thought the movie was great. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I agree. I'm like kind of like Warlord Games. I'm glad it exists. It brings people into the fold and stuff, and package it up nice. Gave you the footnotes, and and like a lot of these movies with me personally, I'll watch it, and if I really enjoy the movie, I'm like, I can't wait for the movie to be over so I can get on Google and start reading, and researching it.
Definitely.
Yeah, I was going to agree with what you said about Cliff Notes. Like, it really felt like, this is that moment. This is this moment. This is moment. Like, we have to check off a number of boxes, which I think is going to be one of my complaints about the movie.
Yeah.
Is boxes.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
We're getting there.
Kelly McManus.
Oh.
You know what this reminds me of? Actually, it's funny, like, a quick aside, as a teacher, one of the things that we do a lot in class is, to become a better writer, you kind of look at writing. And my students, rarely do they enjoy the part where they have to give props to the writer, like what's good about this paragraph. They all are just seething to kind of get to the part where it's like, now I'm going to kind of crap all over this thing. You know what I mean? It's just really fun to be critical. I hate to say it that way, but it's very true. I will say one thing, though, before we get to the neutral kind of part of the film. I want to give one more kind of prop to the film. I think showing Napoleon's relationship with Josephine, I think that was really important. And I know that in a lot of ways, the movie that was sort of the central focus of the film in a lot of ways. In a lot of respects, I think that's a good thing. Because again, I don't like playing the game of the what if game. I mean, it can be fun to do that. I'd rather just look at our sources, right? And use those sources to analyze what we know about these people's lives, right? And I think it's very fair to say that Josephine had a huge impact on Napoleon, right? She is this sort of well-known aristocrat. She's a little bit older than Napoleon. She's basically widowed, and on one hand, she kind of wants to get back into the limelight. And she's going to do that through Napoleon. And she gives him a lot of those inroads. She's the one that introduces him to the right people. In a lot of ways, she is the sort of lightning rod for Napoleon's career, which I appreciate. And I think that it did a really nice job showing that relationship, or and again, the Cliff Notes version of that relationship. So that was something that I kind of liked. Now, what about neutral stuff? I mean, was there anything that you guys saw in the film that you were like, it's all right? Didn't hate it, but didn't love it?
Well, I think it was very hot and cold. I enjoyed all the relationship, a lot of the backstory, and like going through. But like anytime it was the battle, I was like, it bothered me a lot. And I'm just like, I'm not a great movie director or anything, but I think he could have easily shown like different formations and how like the battles actually happened. And I think I don't think it was such a hard thing to do. With the amount of money and talent that they had involved, it could have so easily shown so much stuff, and they just like kind of cheaped out. Like
so
we'll get into all that. But
it didn't make you walk out on the film though.
No,
so it's kind of neutral.
I was actually pretty high on the movie. I'm like, oh, this is really good. I'm enjoying it. And then like when especially the last battle, like at Waterloo, I was just like, it really, really.
Oh, we're gonna get to that
all the way down. Like I was just like, it felt to me in some scenes like high school, ninth grade Matt Klein wrote the script, if I wrote so much stuff when I was in high school, and like when it starts to feel like fan fiction, this and that, I just.
That's actually a perfect way to describe the movie. Feels like fan fiction. Yeah.
No, for sure. Kelly, were you neutral on anything in this film?
Yes and no. There are things I wish were different. There are things that I wish were more like, just so if the movie is going to be about Napoleon and Josephine's relationship, then make the movie about that.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
Yeah.
Like Vanessa Kirby did a pretty good job at being Josephine, I think.
Yeah.
But there's so much, like some of the lovemaking scenes were a little like awkward. Like, why did you just cut to that right away? Like, where's the
lead up?
The movie is not subtle. And it shows, because I don't think Ridley Scott is subtle anymore. I think he's this perverted old man.
Yeah. With him and some of the other famous directors, they're just surrounded by so many yes men now. Earlier in their career, they're like, hey, Ridley, this scene doesn't really work. That never happens.
Yeah.
Now it's like, I am so glad to be on the set with you. Oh my God. And you see it in Hollywood.
Oh yeah.
So the one big thing about Ridley Scott, this all hearsay seen on TV and stuff, was, you have the movie Blade Runner, and then the director Villeneuve, who did the new Blade Runner, which I love. Like, oh yeah, I like Blade Runner. It's a good movie, whatever. It's not as, to me, as high praise. It's whatever. But the second movie I think is amazing. But the thing was, the director was said that like he was having a heart attack with Ridley Scott on set, because Ridley Scott was walking around like this, and he was just like, "Can you just get off my set?" So it shows in all the movies. You look at Spielberg, James Cameron, Lucas, it's what happens. But
getting high on your own supplies, so to speak.
Right? No one, who's going to tell him, who's going to say no, but you can see it, unfortunately.
Well, let me say this. This was a very unfair question of me to ask, because guess what? I'm neutral on nothing. All right. That movie was an abomination. That movie was an abomination. That was the word that I used to describe that film to a couple of people. Goddamn movie was an abomination. I don't even know where to start. And by the way, I'm not this person. For the people out there that don't know me, I tend to be like really easygoing with history movies. And by the way, I don't know everything, right? I tell my students that on a daily basis. I don't know everything, and I don't pretend to. I'm not an expert on Napoleon Bonaparte. Do I have multiple master's degrees? Yes. Do I teach the Napoleonic era every single year? Yes. Am I an expert? No, not necessarily. But you know what? Why don't we just start here? Let's start here. I'm already working myself up, by the way. All right. Why don't we start here? Here's a question to you guys. Ready? Do you think Ridley Scott even asked anybody what actually happened at the real Battle of Waterloo?
No,
not at all.
Not at all. Cliff notes.
I mean,
handed down.
Shameful disgrace. I mean, how hard? Here, I'll give you an example. How hard is it? How hard is it to have the British Army take like 100 steps back over the ridge that they were on to set up their squares where they actually were set up in real life instead of walking forward?
I have one quick question. So you're telling me there was no World War I trench warfare with readouts?
Oh my God. Yeah. The abatis from like the 100 Years War that was like probably taken from his set, the Robin Hood set.
Yeah.
I could not believe what I was seeing. It was just absurd. Like just talking about Waterloo alone. Kelly, what were you thinking watching that battle scene?
So I went to see the movie with two hopes. Like everything would look good, like all the clothing would look good, and that the battle scenes would at least be good because it's Ridley Scott. He did Gladiator, Black Hawk Down, like he did all these movies that are fairly decent in terms of their depictions of warfare. And I absolutely hated every battle scene in the film.
Yeah.
Absolutely hated it. And I understand, like, look, the movie, I'm going to preface everything because I understand the movie is not made for history buffs. It's not made for historians. And the movie is supposed to focus in on, once again, this relationship between Napoleon and Josephine. Totally understand that. And I understand that, like, hey, we're three guys talking about a movie that has shitty battles.
Yeah.
But it has terrible battles.
Yes.
It's horrible. It's sad because it was wasted opportunity. So there were some good shots, like at the Battle of Waterloo, when they set up in square, that famous painting of the British in square, that was mimicked right there.
Completely agree.
But like, it just backs away from a lot of that stuff. Like you have these guys in trenches and then you have a giant cavalry formation coming and then they're getting out of the trenches to fight. Honest, the bad omen to this was, when you saw the trailer and you saw Napoleon charging in.
Oh God, I know.
So as soon as that was like if I had to pick one thing, the dark cloud on the horizon, it was that. And I was like, oh, maybe it's a dream sequence. Maybe he's dreaming about going into battle. And then he did it.
Did you see him charging at Borodino?
Oh,
yeah.
Or whatever that battle was supposed to be, like front wave, like he would be dead.
I mean, look, again, putting the history glasses on for a second, it's like, yes, when Napoleon was younger, right, there are accounts of, him being in the front lines in like 1796, right? Yeah. Which, by the way, the movie completely just glosses over the campaign that really made his career, which is the Italian campaign.
What is Italy?
I know, Italy? Right? Like it's not even
never heard of it. Yeah.
So again, yeah, like it was, I'll describe it this way. It was cringy. It was cringy, and I'm going to say this word, dangerous. Because in the world that we live in, people barely read anyway. Like having somebody go in and having to then go and do their own work after the film is over to like know just simply that like the British Army fell back because of a whole variety of different reasons at the Battle of Waterloo to form their squares. And Ney and other people bring the cavalry over and all of a sudden realize the British Army is in square, right? Like somebody is going to have to do an enormous amount of work to essentially rectify that, not even an error by Ridley Scott. He just made it that way because he wanted to make it that way.
Yeah.
Which again, like as an artist, I mean, I get it, but I mean, it's just, to me, it's dangerous. It's almost misinformation.
Look, never mind Waterloo. That Austerlitz scene had like, if anything was going to make me
target.
They weren't all on the ice. No,
oh God Almighty!
Dude, but like every battle scene, it just turns into this melee. It's like, look, we're not in Gladiator, okay? Like they fought in lines, and there were pushes by
yeah. Again, it's just choice, right? It's choice. So go ahead.
My opinion is he's just so detached from it. Like the decisions to make and storyboard and do those battle scenes were 10 people below him. Yeah. And he literally just walked on set and with his action and framed it out. Like he's detached from it. Like,
yeah. Well, I have a theory on this, which we'll get to in a second, but okay. Like Austerlitz, right? Okay. You're a director. Maybe you've got a couple of historians. Of all the things that happened at that battle, that's what you focus on. You focus on, the Austrians and Russians running away on the ice and a few cannonballs breaking some ice up. So, I mean, if you want to really focus on the life of Napoleon, how about this? Why don't you show him talking to his marshals in advance? Why don't you show him talking about the fact that I'm going to keep one of my flanks really light on troops because I know Davout's not here yet. I'm going to entice the enemy to literally cross the center of my army to attack this flank that is clearly weak on purpose. And then when that happens, I'm going to literally split the enemy into two pieces. You don't tell that story, but you show the ice cracking. And ultimately, I have two thoughts on this. Number one, to me, this is the error with the entire film. It seems like Ridley Scott chose the silliest parts of these moments, the silliest parts of these battles to portray. Instead of showing the moments of whether it's genius or whether it's a high point of the battle, he didn't really choose those moments, and he just sort of chose these sort of silly, awkward things. It's really about the choices that he made as a director, right? So what do you guys think on that?
He wanted that Steven Spielberg, Saving Private Ryan, blood in the water.
Yes.
Scene, like it's like that's why I'm like, and like what's the actual number of casualties actually fell through the ice?
Not a lot.
I think it was like 100 horses and like 2 people. And they made it into the entire. And once again, like everything you just said, I can completely visualize. Could have been easily shown. He could have been in his war room, blocks on the table, like I want you guys to do this, and then it could have been shown so easily and like just wasted opportunity.
So if you Googled the cast of the film, like on Google or whatever, and it shows you like who everyone's supposed to be portraying, like they do have like Anay, they do have whoever, which is like cool, but they didn't say anything. I will say though, like I'm happy that General Dumas was shown in Egypt. I hate that General Dumas was shown at the coronation because he had fallen out of favor with Napoleon. Right. Like I love that like these characters are there, but also like show them at the appropriate time.
No, totally. But look, here's my thinking on this, right? And again, I don't want you to agree with me because I'm the host. Push back on this if you don't agree, right? This is all I could think about. The British loved their propaganda about Napoleon when he was alive, and they love it now.
Oh, yeah.
So how does the film end, right? The film ends, well, first off, even if we back up, Napoleon is not really shown as a particularly adept commander, right? In my opinion, he's shown in these random moments. He's shown as this sort of megalomaniac, power-hungry person, which is all like accurate. Like the guy certainly had a complex. Like he wanted power and was addicted to it. Absolutely. I'm not going to debate that. However, if you look, for example, at the Battle of Waterloo, if we're going to use that as the example, he's sort of, first off, he's inaccurately portrayed completely during that battle, right? Nothing is shown about the fact that he was sick that day. Nothing was shown about the fact that really when things started to go wrong, he wasn't around, right? And it was really only until things really got out of hand that he kind of put his general glasses back on to kind of try to, I guess, almost take the battle over, so to speak, from his subordinates, right? None of that's shown. And I think it's on purpose, right? Because if you look at the very last scene in the movie, they throw all the different battles that were shown in the film and all of the casualty rates. And then at the very bottom, basically talk about, these 3 million people dying because of Napoleon Bonaparte. So here's the thing. I just think that it was a smear job, just like the British have always done. And you know what? I'm sorry, but you are going to get I don't know what the right word is, not nastiness out of me, but British propaganda. It still exists. And ultimately, I really think that Napoleon got done dirty, right?
Yeah.
And again, nothing was in there about the Napoleonic Code. Nothing was in there about the fact that this person, yes, he was a megalomaniac, but he also toppled absolute monarchies. Nothing is in there during the Congress of Vienna about the fact that, yes, these aristocrats who he overthrew, right, are trying to remake the world in the image that existed before him, right? That's not in there. Nothing's in there about the fact that the Napoleonic Code really becomes the framework for constitutional monarchy in Europe, right? In which there were rebellions in the 1830s and 1840s, because ultimately the average person, wants rights, None of that is in there. And instead, Napoleon is basically portrayed in the same light as a Hitler or a Stalin, which there have been plenty of articles written about this recently because of the war in Ukraine. So to me, it's British propaganda. And Ridley Scott is just the newest member of it. In fact, there was even a scene in there, right, showing some of the British propaganda from the actual time period, So meaning the actual time period that Napoleon was basically alive, right? And classic, right? Nothing is shown about the Prussians winning the Battle of Waterloo, right? Nothing was shown about that. Nothing is shown about the Russians. God only knows how many hundreds of thousands of people they lost. It's just classic, the British won the Napoleonic Wars.
Yep.
That's how I feel. And I know I'm fired up right now.
Well, no, which I'm going to relate this to wargaming because this throws me off the edge too. Is like, how many wargamers do you know within, once again, the English-speaking world show, like, where is Leipzig? Where are the Austrians? No, it's Iberia and Spain, and we have Sharp, or it's Waterloo, and there's no Dutch, Belgians, Hungarians, or like the British barely did anything. Okay. They funded they supplied a lot of weapons, they funded money, but like in terms of blood spent, this was a continental European conflict.
Right.
Okay, like I'm just looking at it's like England, like UK, you can't choose when you want to be part of Europe and when you can't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. By the way, we're probably offending all my British guests on this podcast.
Look, I'm sorry, but the reality of the situation is like England is a bank for the rest of Europe during this time period. All right? Frederick the Great couldn't win the war without English money. It's true. But at the end of the day, it's not like you're not fielding a 100,000 man army. Okay.
Right. Matt, what do you think? Are you fired up?
Fired up. No, I agree with you though. It's a disservice and stuff. And the amount of King's German Legion, like there was all different types, Belgians and Dutch and stuff and Hanoverians and everything. It is pretty wild. It's like everybody in a red coat, the British, and that's how it went. Yeah. But 100%. But I honestly think he's so far removed from all that. Ridley Scott, like, I mean, his name's on it, so he's got to take the hit. But it's sad, just wasted opportunity, because everything you said in the 4 minutes about that battle, I could totally visualize, and it could have been done, And you see glimpses of it, like stuff, and that, and like, wow, why don't you just like just even like when they start opening up their volleys on each other. I'm looking at my friend, who's like a Civil War historian, and I'm like, they're way too far away. They would not be
right. I remember that.
Like they would be, you could even like when they first meet each other on the field at Waterloo and they're engaging each other, way out of range. Yeah.
Yeah. I also love
go ahead, Kel.
The field dries the moment it stops raining.
It's good. It's good to go.
Yeah.
What about the sniper? He's my MVP. He actually got Napoleon in the hat.
Yeah.
Got him in the hat.
Matt Klein, are you trying to give me a heart attack? Because I wasn't going to talk about that, but
that it up. I would have to say that's the worst scene. And don't shoot him. It's not. What did he? I don't even remember his words. That was out of my mind. What did Wellington say? What did he say to the sniper?
Don't shoot him or something like that. Yeah, that's not gentlemanly. Look, for the guy who's going to be editing this video, Jared, can we have the Unreal Tournament headshot go over and then show like something from Unreal Tournament?
Possibly. I don't know. I mean,
I'll record it for you.
Adi Pandit, the greatest audio engineer in the history of audio engineers. I don't know what he's going to do to this video. I mean, you never know. He may be able to kind of slide one of those photos in, but it was just cringeworthy.
That scene was bad. And then so Wellington earlier in the battle says, "Don't shoot at him."
Yeah.
And then he does, and then later on he just like, fuck it.
So again, I'm not going to pretend to know the accuracy there, right? If you've ever seen the original 1970 movie Waterloo, right? There is a famous scene in there where a British artilleryman, as the armies are kind of set up, there's a British artilleryman who kind of rides over to Wellington. It's like, hey, like I see Napoleon out there. Can I take a shot? And basically Wellington says, something very similar in the 1970 movie where he's like, we basically have better things to do with our time than shoot at generals, which ultimately is kind of, that sort of, again, like the British are so gentlemanly, So again, like I don't know if that was actually said at the real battle, but I do know that, there were definitely a couple of homages to the Waterloo movie, which I guess Ridley Scott must have watched. You know what I mean? Maybe. But yeah, like, I don't know, man. This will be my last point on this, just because now it really sounds like I'm ranting and raving. But like, even something as simple as, could you at least show the Napoleon's Imperial Guard making that last attack?
Yeah, they didn't show that.
Because they had people in the Imperial Guard uniform. And by the way, if you don't know anything about the Battle of Waterloo, okay, so let's do a little history lesson here. And again, don't get me wrong, I'm not an expert on this, right? There's probably people out there that can give a better narrative of this account than me. But ultimately, the Prussian army, right, who had been defeated at a battle called Ligny before Waterloo, they had basically eluded a French corps of about 30,000 men. They more or less eluded them and kept a rear guard to keep these 30,000 Frenchmen, which is a huge part of Napoleon's army. It's about a third of his army. Because what Napoleon was afraid of was he was afraid that the Prussians were going to show up at Waterloo to help the British. And that's exactly what they did. They basically caved in Napoleon's flank.
Yeah.
And what Napoleon was doing at the end of the battle, right, was he kind of knows the Prussians are there, but he also knows that he has battered the British army, right? And again, the movie, just sort of completely glosses over most of the actual fighting of the battle. But the bottom line is, in that last scene, what that's trying to show is the British are really down on ammunition. They've been battered for hours and hours and hours. So what Napoleon does is something he almost never does. He commits the Imperial Guard. The Imperial Guard is really the most veteran troops, the most acknowledged troops in the army, and they kind of push forward. And yes, the British absolutely stopped them, right? And it's really one of the first times in the Napoleonic era that that's happened to the Imperial Guard. But again, like, they show regular French line marching in more like modern formation than what they would have, back then. And it's just completely glossed over. I think, Matt, you're right. I think he just didn't care, to kind of show that, So look, I don't know, guys, if there's anything you want to add. Yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
The real question, how many rubber bayonets did you see?
Oh, God. See, I don't have an eye for that.
Oh, yeah, I didn't see any of that. Yeah.
Oh, no, I saw so many.
Saw them?
No, I'm going to watch.
Did I say a comment about how many flags do you need in that movie?
Oh,
no, you have not.
No, I haven't. All right. So how many flags do you need in each of these camps? And why are the camps right on the battlefield?
Yeah.
Why? Like you don't, every tent doesn't need its own flag. Okay.
Yeah. And now we're really starting to hear the bitterness.
Oh, that is funny too. Because like they had like French, like a lot of like not unit flags. They just had like French flag. These are the French people. These are the
right.
And I think near the end
dumbed it down.
And the end of the movie, he's using like the 1806 flag for 1812, and he's mixing them up. I'm like, come on, a little bit.
Knowing the two of you guys, we're like the least type of person to be complaining about films, right? Mm-hmm. I can't imagine what those Type A wargamers out there, they must have exploded inside the theater, right? So look, if you are one of those folks, put some comments in, because we're going to start to wrap this podcast up. I think you guys get the sense of how we feel about this movie, right? Definitely some moments where it was great, definitely lost opportunity, but ultimately certain elements of this, especially from a military perspective, absolute abominations.
I don't think he should have done, like, if the movie's main focus is on Napoleon and Josephine, which is perfect. Like, I would love to see more of that. Make the movie about that.
Yeah.
Don't like, and the problem is he tried to do it all. And this is probably the best you're going to get if you try to do it all, but don't.
Yeah.
I would have loved to seen that more of that dynamic between him and her, and what that all entails. Because like the two of them were kind of awful to each other. In a lot of ways. Like they were like, if you read like some of the memoirs, like in his Italian campaign where he finds out she's cheating, so then he starts like they were terrible for each other.
Yeah.
But like if you're going to make a movie about that, then make the movie about that. Don't try to throw in your war scenes. Don't, like, if you're going to make a movie about the political aspect of it, make the movie about the political. Don't try to do it all.
Yeah. I agree. I think that's definitely You took the words out of my mouth, Kelly. I think he tried to do a lot. And by the way, you have to wonder too, and maybe this is for a different podcast. Maybe it's not even appropriate for this podcast, because I made a point earlier about, the way that Napoleon was sort of portrayed in the film. And I guess it's just kind of funny to me in the sense that, are we really going to pretend that this hadn't been happening in Europe for hundreds of years? Do you know what I mean? Like, we get this smear of Napoleon where he's kind of presented as almost this feeble-minded, very weird sexual partner.
He's like a cuckold.
Yeah, like, for real. Like, it was almost like he was meant to be this weird comedic joke, and just the cause of all of these losses of life, which again, like, he absolutely was, because he was a warmonger ultimately. Like, he didn't need to invade Russia. He didn't need to do those things, right? He kind of did it because that's what he was used to doing. And that's his way of gaining power, was basically through the military. I get all of that. But if we're going to portray him as a villain, who else are we going to portray as villainous? Meaning like the Duke of Wellington, right? Who is always in these movies portrayed as this sort of angelic figure. What about his career, right?
Yeah.
What did he do after the Napoleonic era? He went to India, right? Sort of as again, like, which the British will never admit to, but like as this sort of oppressive figure who was basically going to kind of keep things under control there, right? Where's the movie about that? You know what I mean? Are we going to kind of do the same narrative where we show all of the battles that Wellington fought at and all of the casualties? So I guess, I don't know, man. Almost like maybe I'm being a bit vindictive here, but I don't know. I guess really my main point here is Napoleon that radically different than other military dictators before him, right? Is he worse than Frederick the Great? Is he worse than, I don't know, off the top of my head, Henry V? Is he worse than Henry V? Is he worse than Richard the Lionheart, right? I don't know. But that was definitely something that, I'll frame it this way. It left me with questions, which maybe it's not a bad thing. Questions are good, So
I'm fearful you're going to lose so many of your English listeners.
I might, but look, I'm a little afraid too. But look, so all the folks that I've had on from that island, which I do like, by the way, I think it's going to be okay. I think that they're still going to love us.
We love England.
We do. All right. Well, actually, maybe we'll have to have some of them on to talk about the movie.
That's actually good.
Yeah, we'll have to, have them on and get their sort of take,
That's
all right. To wrap up, one of the things that I love to do at the end of a podcast, especially a marathon podcast like this one, is just to kind of ask some questions about what some things are that we're sort of doing hobby-wise, right? Kelly McManus, start with you.
Yeah.
What are you working on?
So I actually, since last time, I painted a few more Germans for my World War II projects, with Steve. And I'm still going at my Napoleonics, repainting everything, rebasing everything, which I feel like you need to do once in your life if you're going to be a war gamer, from what I've heard. So that's coming out pretty well. I got one regiment painted up, so now I'm working on the second one.
Yeah, gotcha. And what about you, Matt? What are some things you're doing?
So I'm actually working on some 28 millimeter samurai armies right now. That company Fireforge, they had a Kickstarter earlier, and I just got all the plastics, and they're beautiful. Really, you could do a lot with them. So I'm working on that. And then the other big project I'm working on, World War I rule set Stormtrooper, and I just been play testing that. The unfun part of just trying to figure out all the mechanics and everything like that. But I've been having a great time with that and just doing lots of different units and painting a lot of different stuff up. So British, French, Germans.
I love your samurai, by the way. Yeah, I love your samurai.
Thank you so much. So, look, it's a great period. They've had plastic miniatures, but they've been really not great. The new ones are really nice. The cavalry is beautiful. So many options, and it's a really cool period that I always loved since when I was a kid. I used to play that game Shogun? Bill Bradley, the Game Master series. So I've always wanted to just do that in bigger scale.
Yeah, that's awesome. And by the way, we could spread the wealth a little bit. We could spread the hate a little because of our fire today. But look, it's funny for our British audience out there. Here, this will make you feel better. Look, we were talking about this before we came on the podcast, right? Look, the samurai great gaming period. Not the nicest people, right? The understatement of the century. But if you watch a lot of movies, the samurai class are basically portrayed as, in film, as like, honor, duty, nothing about privilege, nothing about beheading people and getting paid for how many heads, were cut off. Nothing about the fact that the samurai tried to essentially stop the Meiji Restoration, essentially tried to keep Japan sort of closed off. My point is that movies do have a tendency to do this. And I know, Matt, there was something we were talking about earlier.
No, absolutely. That's the thing too. Is consuming all the media and reading stuff. It's like the real story of like how savage warfare is and stuff. It's they attempt to portray it, but it really isn't portrayed the way it is. Yeah.
Do you find that, given your experience as a vet, like, do you find that with some of the media that comes out based on your own experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing from the stuff I saw, and what it is when you have entertainment, they're trying to reach somebody that's not even in the same universe of that mindset, and it's so alien for somebody to find. So you see glimpses of it in movies, but most of the time it's just a caricature.
Yeah.
So and even like we were talking, I think last podcast, it was like the morality of wargaming. Some people are like, oh, it's so it's kind of morbid, it's warmongering. It's a caricature of what like real is and stuff. But the reason why you see that once again is because they're trying to reach an audience that's so far removed from it.
Yeah.
So it's not an easy thing to show. Yeah,
no, for sure. I'm exhausted. I don't know about you guys. I'm shot. I mean, I will say this to kind of end the podcast, I guess, on some level. One of the things that I've been working on a lot with my miniatures, and I'll see if I can, because I'd love to be able to post all of your work, meaning Matt, the samurai you're painting, Kelly, the Napoleonics that you're working on. What I'll do is I'll curate a little photo montage of these things. That way somebody can listen and watch this pod and then actually see some of the things we're working on. One of the things that I'm doing, and by the way, Pitch White, one of my best friends in the world, he's also a guy that's been on the pod. He's been on once, but he'll be on a lot more in the future. I'm making him very happy right now. He's all about basing. I've been working a lot on that. So I'm painting up these War of the Roses figures, and shout out to Essex Miniatures, by the way, old school.
Good stuff.
They are, yeah. And they've been around forever. So I've been painting those up, and what I really kind of went for was a diorama feel on the big bases. So I've got these big, like 120 millimeter bases, and I'm putting some grass tufts on them. I'm using some Games Workshop technical paints for the actual mud patches, and using different kinds of flock to really kind of make it look dynamic. I'm very happy with the way everything has sort of turned out. So that's kind of what I've been working on primarily. And I'll also say this to you guys, it'd be nice to have, maybe around the holiday season, we'll have to find a central location, because that's the issue. We're all so far away from each other. We'll have to get together and do some gaming together. I know, Matt, you've invited me over a few times. I'm not gonna, can you move away from Long Island, Matt? Can we talk about this?
I know, it's horrible. If there's never the zombie apocalypse, I'm gonna be stuck here.
Yeah,
going through New York.
Yeah, did you grow up in Long Island?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. You lived there forever.
Left for the military, and then I took the NYPD test, and that's why I came back.
Gotcha.
For the NYPD, I would have never came back here.
Yeah, no, I hear you, dude. That's a whole nother topic for other. I also escaped New York, like Russell. And such. But joking aside, like, it'd be nice to get like a kind of like a 20-sided gamified guest list gaming, around the holidays. We'll have to try to make that happen,
you're always welcome here, man.
I know. I know that.
I don't pay the.
Well, no, it's not even that. It's just, I mean, the traffic is just brutal. Like, when I'm done, when you guys game, when I'm done with my day, I mean, if the traffic is bad, I'll never get there,
Yeah, no. 100%.
So we'll have to find a central location, But I really appreciate the fact that you guys did this. By the way, is it different recording video?
No.
You're used to that, right?
Yeah, I've done a couple.
No, I know that's an understatement, because I know, like, with Battle Tribe, which you'll have to talk about in a sec, to give people a sense of where they can find you, so to speak. But yeah, I know you do a lot of that. What about you, Kelly?
I've done this for work, where we have like lectures come on, and it's during COVID, So I'm used to it.
Yeah. My fear is that I don't know, like I feel like a lot of times I present as the TV dad. That's what a couple of teachers that I work with that's kind of what they say about me, I guess. I don't know if I was TV dad today. I feel like I was like a psychopath.
Yeah, I kind of let loose a bit.
And people can see my facial expressions, But
It's
look,
wrong.
it comes from a good place. I don't expect all the buttons on a military coat to be in the right place. I don't expect a movie about the 1930s to have headgear that looked exactly the way people would look in Chicago with headgear or something like that. I don't get crazy, but this movie fired me up. And the worst part is I told all my students, who some of them might be listening, you guys got to go see this movie. And now it's like, I feel like I need to say to them tomorrow, I'm sorry, guys, like, let's actually, more about this time period than Ridley Scott, So I'll say this, and I do mean this very seriously. I think about all my English friends. Thinking about people that we've had on this podcast, Pendrock and Miniatures, Peter Pig Miniatures, author of Strength and Honor, my friend Mark. We're going to have Rich from Two Fat Lardies on. I really am sorry. I hope that you don't hate me. But look, we'll have to do a podcast at some point where you defend your island and you can call me a colonist if you want. I know the Brits love doing that. I keep digging myself a new hole here. Right? That's what I'm trying to apologize, but I'm still being insulting. But you guys, look, I love you. You know that. All right. Matt,
we wouldn't be here
ahead,
without you.
No, I know. Yeah, you're gonna read about me in the news. They strung me up. They flew here, and
you're gonna get on the miniatures page. You're gonna be a point of conversation.
Oh, dude, no, that's a whole nother conversation. Is the miniatures page, but
you're already there.
Oh,
I don't know if you've Googled it, but you are there.
Oh yeah,
it's all good stuff so far.
Good. For now,
this probably won't help.
No, it won't. Matt Rendar or Matt Klein. I know you go by both terms. All right, Matt. So if somebody wants to find your stuff, can you tell people where to look?
Yeah, sure. On social media, Matt Rendar. That's like my it's where I do my art and brand, Battle Tribe, and I have all the different projects I'm currently working on. If you want to see like what I'm wargaming, it's really not refined. It's more of like a blog. I kind of just like do some handheld video and splice it together. That's Matt Rendar on YouTube. So I do all cool. pretty much I game every Wednesday, and I put it together real quick and put it up there. We just did battle. We did a bolt action game for in Berlin. So we did it was pretty big. We did like 3,000 points.
Oh my God.
Side. Yeah, it was a lot of Russians, a lot of Germans, but it was a good time. Cool. But yeah, social media though, on Instagram, Matt Rendar. And cool. Can I do one shameless plug?
No. Plugs are good. Okay. No, it's fine.
The last like really big project I just did is there's a gentleman, Christian Craighead. He was a former SAS operator. He was involved in a ton of stuff, long career, 28 years in the British military. And in 2019, there was a terrorist attack down in Nairobi, Kenya, at this hotel, and 5 terrorists went in there and started killing civilians. So he was actually off duty, rushed in there, and helped really finish it off. And been friends with him for a bit. So he reached out to me about writing a children's book. And he was like, "Hey, you want to get involved?" I'm like, "Absolutely." So me and him worked together, and we self-published it, and it's coming out actually this Wednesday. It's called The Wrong Wolf. So cool. If you're looking for a holiday gift for, I'd say from like 6 to 12, 13 years old. It's a book that he had, so really cool. It has a lot of awesome, parallels with his military career, but they also too. He's another rabbit hole. You Google Christian Craighead, look him up.
Cool. Yeah. Well, look,
very wild career.
Yeah, there's plenty of listeners out there, which I know as I look at the sort of diagnostics of this podcast. Lots of people are listening, so it's nice. It's a nice little project you sort of got yourself involved in. And again, like your art is awesome. I mean, thanks. For those of you that don't know, I didn't mention this at the beginning of the podcast, but the logo for 20-sided Gamified, the shirts and hoodies that Kelly and I are going to wear at PAX, which by the time this comes out will probably already be there. Matt did all the artwork for that stuff. So I just want to make sure that he gets credit for that. So I guess when the podcast becomes gigantic, Matt, hopefully, thousands of people across the world, or maybe more than that, will be wearing your artwork on their bodies. So we'll have to see, man.
Congratulations again, being on the Flames of War page. That's awesome.
Oh, thanks, man. It was very cool. Yeah, it was very, very cool. Because I interviewed Wayne, Wayne Turner, who did a lot of the stuff. Well, he's been with the company for a really, really long time. Yeah. But he specifically has done a ton of Team Yankee stuff. Yeah. So he does a lot of the source books, and he's a really cool guy. If for those of you out there, if you like Flames of War, listen to that podcast, because you get a nice little deep dive into where the company came from, where it was founded, and everything. So, all right, people. So for our new friends that are listening to the pod or watching this episode, and for the people that have been listening since the beginning, huge thank you to everybody. I hope you guys have a great day. Stay hydrated, eat some, stay healthy, work out a little bit. And yeah, right. Coming from gamers. And I will see you guys later. Thanks, guys, for coming on.